the sports betting network.
This is the VSiN Morning Line on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Welcome into the VSiN Morning Line. Happy Monday, and thank you for beginning your day with us. Grace Remington here with Michael Lombardi and Harrison Sanford, recapping NFL Week 1 and college football Week 2. So much to get to, but first, guys, it was our first NFL weekend. Michael, how did it feel? How was your setup? Tell us everything.
Oh, it was great. You know, the weather's perfect back on the East Coast. It was awesome, and had a great setup outside so you could eat and watch football games. I didn't realize that on the NFL Sunday Ticket, you could still put the game in your area in the quad box. So, you know, the afternoon games, there were just 4. I got to watch all of them. I did 4-game Femi and that, and it was fun. So it was great. There's a lot to cover, though. There's a lot. And I don't want to overreact, Grace, but to me, there was a lot to cover. And there are some assumptions that you can make based on what we saw yesterday.
Just like you, Michael, I had the quad box going too. It was a glorious Sunday, even better because a lot of people in my survivor pool decided to pick the Bengals to win. And obviously that did not happen. I have advanced to the next week. I have a lot of people in my survival pool already using their buyback option. So it was a good Sunday. And I'm curious, Michael, did you have the sound going for this Sunday?
Yeah.
Still no audio?
No, well, I had to because my wife was watching. So I had the sound on in the first games. I had the sound on. And what game was that? I had one game on, just the sound in that. Oh, the Jacksonville-Miami game, which was we get to that. And then the afternoon, I wanted to listen to Brady. So I had the sound on the second half of the second game. So, but there were so many. The 1 o'clock window was great. It was awesome. There were so many games going down. You know, we're going to talk a lot about the Tennessee and Chicago game, which was, you know, you're still sitting there wondering how the hell did Tennessee lose that game? Will Levis, but we'll get to that later, Grace.
Yeah, that 1 o'clock slate was awesome, and quad box for the win. Here in Nashville, when I woke up, it was actually close to 40 degrees in the morning. Neutralized back to its dry 90-degree heat by the middle of the day, but it really felt like football weather for the first time. I had to put my sweatshirt on. I know, right? Nashville's weird, but went down to the local farmer's market store, got some chili, so it really felt like football weather over here. But let's take a look at what's coming up later on the show. We have 3 guests joining us today. Later on in the hour, it's Carl Johnson with some bookmaker insights from this weekend's slate. Rich Gannon, former NFL quarterback, joining us at 8:30 Eastern with his NFL Week 1 recap with Michael Lombardi. And then Jennifer Chan Lee joining us at 9:30 Eastern with her Monday Night Football preview. She's on the 49ers beat, so lots of good insight there. But coming up in this hour for us, we're going to recap the NFL Week 1 games, recap the college football Week 2 games, and then, of course, get into some more betting insights with Carl Johnson. So, guys, we'll start with the Cowboys beating the Browns, but obviously the biggest news of the weekend happened just hours before that game when Dak Prescott and the Cowboys finally agreed to terms, those being a 4-year deal, $260 million extension. He now becomes the highest paid player in NFL history in terms of average per year at $60 million, passing the previous record by Joe Burrow's $55 million. The $80 million signing bonus, also the largest ever. Michael, what do you think about this deal going down?
You know, I was a little bit surprised that it got done right before the season, but I think that threshold of the beginning of the season, the worrying about injury, is always a concern for players. Obviously not for Jamar Chase. He let that window pass. But I think when you're in this situation, you're over 30 years old, you want to make sure you get the deal done. And like I've said from the beginning, where was Dak ever going to go? The fact that he was a free agent really was insignificant. He wasn't going to leave to go to the New York Football Giants, who, by the way, Grace, a little secret I'm going to let you in on. They're going to be looking for a quarterback in about 17 weeks. And then he wasn't going there. And then, you know,
only
could
17?
he go to the Raiders? No. What's that, Harrison? Huh?
Only 17 weeks?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's when they can officially start looking for a quarterback. I mean, they should be looking for one now. I mean, poor John Mara. I mean, he had to watch Saquon Barkley score 3 touchdowns, and then he had to watch Daniel Jones, who he gave $40 million to, play like that, and made Sam Darnold make all the Jet fans say, see, I told you he was good. I told you he was good. Anyway, let's get back to Dak Prescott. Look, it was a deal that was going to happen. I was surprised it happened before the season. And look, all the conversation, this is what was blowing my mind. This is what you have to be very careful with. All the conversation in the offseason was about Dallas and their contracts. Nobody was talking about all the uncertainty with Deshaun Watson, the 2 offensive tackles who were going to miss games that were injured coming off the list, the Browns not having Nick Chubb. We never talked about that. That line moved from Dallas as the rightful favorite to Cleveland becoming the favorite. And Harrison, I thought it was clear. Cleveland was by far the lesser team.
Yeah, it definitely looked like that. You're talking about Jedrick Willis Jr. and Jack Conklin. Not having them out there was definitely a cause for concern for the Cleveland Browns yesterday, particularly for Deshaun Watson, who did not look good. He was under fire from the moment the game started, and it really didn't clear up for him. It really makes you look at some of the props that are out there and some of the fantasy implications that are out there for the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, he did not hit his over on passing yards. He was sacked 6 times for 32 yards, but it makes me think here, he is somewhat still, even though his arm, if you look at Twitter, a lot of people calling him noodle-armed, he still somewhat has his legs. He did cash over on his rushing prop. It was set at 21.5. He went for 5 rushes for 39 yards. It might be something that you look at if he's going to continue to be under pressure, particularly when you have a team that could put pressure on the quarterback like the Cowboys do. You could look at week number 4 when he takes on Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins and the Las Vegas Raiders. That's something to look at as well. But overall, he did not look good. And because I know you're from Philadelphia, Michael, it made me think of Tobias Harris as well. When you get paid that much money,
this is
not
worse
easy.
than Tobias. This is
way worse than Tobias.
Give Tobias his due. It wasn't his fault they paid him all that money. But Tobias, he'll post some numbers. He wasn't worth it. They should have signed Jimmy Butler. We don't have time to go down that rabbit hole today. But this one is not only is this one bad, Deshaun, he looked bad. He's got no control of the football. He's inaccurate. I mean, he's got 45 attempts. And he throws for 169 yards. Now, let's just put things in perspective. Joe Flacco last year throws for 1,616 yards in 5 games. In 6 games, Watson threw for 1,100. So it's not the skill players. It's not the offense. It's the quarterback. It's clear. And here's the problem, Grace. They doubled down. They guaranteed his salary this year, which was already guaranteed, but they treated it as a signing bonus. So next year, his salary cap balloons to $72 million. All those people in Cleveland calling for them to take the Band-Aid off and get rid of Deshaun Watson, it can't happen. $99 million of acceleration would go into next year's cap with another 70 the following year. He's at $72 million on the cap next year. You fired the offensive coordinator. You hired a new offensive coordinator. And look, let's face it. For what happened? The defense, I know they didn't play well. How stupid is it to kick the ball to Turpin? I've said it on my podcast. I've said it. The Browns are so unaware. They kicked the ball down the middle of the field twice to Turpin. They're lucky he didn't take 2 back for a touchdown. So, look, they get what they deserve. This contract was ridiculous, Grace, and it's going to continue to be ridiculous.
Right. You can't blame the loss all on Watson, but there are some advanced passing numbers I want to highlight here. On passes of 15 or more air yards downfield, 0 for 10. Passes of 20 or more yards downfield, 0 for 4. He was pressured on 45% of his dropbacks. He went 3 for 12 when throwing under pressure for just 10 yards. 10 for 9 passing for 13 yards, in addition to 3 sacks when blitzed. So this is a guy who, when he was in Houston, he was probably one of the top 10 most efficient quarterbacks in the league when throwing passes down the field. His completion rate on those deep passes has dropped from 43% to 28% from the Texans to the Browns. And then just dissecting this trade a little bit more, we know Cleveland had to give up 6 draft picks, including 3 firsts to Houston. Houston, with their shuffling, has now gotten 11 players for Deshaun from that trade. And a fun little wrinkle too. Dak's deal, $231 million in guarantees, tops the $230 by $1 million that Deshaun got in this trade. So it's kind of funny timing. Wondering if they did that on purpose. But what are your thoughts on just this decline in his downfield efficiency?
It's been going on, right? I mean, when he was at his prime in Houston, he was averaging over 8.5 yards per attempt down the field, which to me is a key number. Remember, all we used to talk about was Deshaun Watson along with Will Fuller, that combination of deep throws and his ability to make loose plays. But I think you have to really deal with the elephant in the room. Money. Does he really want to be a great football player? It sure as hell doesn't look like it. It looks like he's a rich man, a very rich man who's content with it. I mean, the fact that I don't see a lot of rallying around, and I think the bigger issue here is, what's that locker room think? Like, I think that locker room has to worry about, where are we? I mean, this is a big opening day game in Cleveland. The fans think they got a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And to get humiliated in front of the game was over. It was over quick. And Dallas, I would not even have said played their best game. I mean, they punted 6 times in a game. You know, they ran the ball effectively, but to me, there's so much that's going on here, but I'm not sure Watson really has the eye of the tiger that he wants to play. I think he's very content with what's going on.
Okay, as we head to break in about 40 seconds here, I'll leave you guys with this hilarious quote from Hannah McNair, the Texans vice president of their Houston Texans Foundation and the wife of the owner, Cal McNair. She appeared on a podcast in August and said, "Have you thanked to Brown lately? I thank him for all of our players." Yeah. All right. We are just getting started here on the VSiN Morning Line. Coming up after the break, what the heck happened to the Bengals and what's it mean for Jerod Mayo? We're breaking down these NFL Week 1 games as the VSiN Morning Line continues.
Time. There's nothing more valuable. It's what drives everyone to make the most of every moment. We celebrate living large in the now. In a city where time disappears, we create experiences that electrify the soul and memories that will last forever. We go big, we go all night, and here, everyone is invited. So get loose and get loud.
This is Circa. You'll have the time of your life.
Coming up Monday on Follow the Money, we'll recap Week 1 of the NFL. We look at the opening numbers in college football with Circa bookmaker Nick Bogdanovich, and Monday Night Football, a good one, Jets and Niners. Follow the Money weekdays, 4 to 7 Eastern on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Want to see who at VSiN is on a hot streak? Go to VSiN.com/picks to see all the selections and weekly leaderboard of VSiN hosts, writers, and guests. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber and get every pick sent to your inbox daily. Just head to VSiN.com/pro.
So, Paulie, have you had a chance to read the VSiN Daily yet?
Yeah, came in at 3 a.m. What's Bill doing up that late?
Well, rumor has it, it starts off with a 12-hour meditation session.
Then he just pours himself over film and live TV, really focusing and taking it all in. Bill's in with the biggest insiders, talking trade secrets, strategies, the whole nine, absorbing the info.
And then and only then can the writing process begin.
In Las Vegas, Bill's late night becomes your early morning. Wake up to the very latest betting insights in your inbox with the VSiN Daily. Sign up for free at vsin.com/newsletter.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line. Happy Monday. Plenty of shocking results to get into after NFL Week 1. Grace Remington joining you with Michael Lombardi and Harrison Sanford. The most shocking of them all was the Patriots beating the Bengals 16-10, closing as a 7.5-point underdog. It was the biggest Week 1 upset since 2018. Even more brutal was for members of the Circa Survivor pool. A whopping 34.3% of entries have been eliminated. So just over 14,200 entries, 4,900 are now out. Michael, did you
I would have been
the
one of
Bengals
those.
in any? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I would have been out. I was on Cincinnati. And here's the thing that drives me crazy, especially when I'm such a believer in the line, past performance predicts future achievement. I mean, last year, Joe Burrow in the opening game throws for 82 yards. Zach Taylor going into yesterday was 0-4 the first 2 weeks the last 2 years. So we know his team starts. But I watched him this summer, and I convinced myself wrongly that they were more in tune, that they were practicing harder, that they looked prepared. Because if you remember correctly, last year they opened up in Cleveland. Burrow throws for 82 yards. He's got the calf injury. They rush for 70. But yesterday, I mean, New England comes in there and rushes for 170 yards, controls the line of scrimmage. Cincinnati has no ability to really stop the run. They look like they missed DJ Reader tremendously in the game. And then Burrow, for all the conversation about Chase, who's not going to get a new contract, for all those conversations, they couldn't make any plays. Mike Gesicki has a touchdown pass. It gets overturned. The next play, they fumble, and then the Patriots pick it up. The Bengals look so unprepared. Their offensive line wasn't good enough, and they really couldn't get off the field against the Patriot offense that was so one-dimensional. Look, I don't think you upgrade the Patriots here, Harrison, but what I do think is that the Bengals have a lot of concerns as they travel to Kansas City next week.
Oh, they definitely do. From a Survivor perspective, I avoided the Bengals. And yes, I know it was a popular pick, but I think the fact that T. Higgins wasn't out there would add on to the fact that Jamar Chase hasn't really been with the team, practicing with the team because he's had this whole contract dispute. From a Survivor perspective, I stayed away from it. I went ahead and picked the Seahawks to win or the Broncos to lose, however you want to look at it. But yeah, no, it was definitely concern for the Cincinnati Bengals, and they've had this trend of getting off to bad starts. But you do also have to give some credit to the Patriots defense as well. Christian Gonzalez is back in that defensive backfield. Remember, he had a season-ending injury last year because he had the torn labrum. Their former first-round pick at the defensive back position. But nonetheless, you add in all those factors now. It does not look good for the Bengals. It didn't look good. And now with the Kansas City Chiefs coming off of rest as well. And as we get, look further into the week and we look into the week 2 games, if you look at Andy Reid's record against the spread when he has the rest advantage, that's also going to be in the Kansas City Bengals' favor as well. So not a good start from the Bengals, but unfortunately, Grace, this is somewhat typical for Zach Taylor's team.
Yeah, that's a great point about the Chiefs coming off rest. From a Survivor standpoint, Bengals were not my first pick. As I explained to you guys last week, I kind of wanted to take a contrarian stance. So I went with the Vikings. That worked out. I actually had 3 entries. Seahawks were my other one. So I was with you, Harrison. And then I felt bad. I got talked into taking the Bengals in my third one, but it's fine. I'm still alive in the other 2. But obviously a huge problem for the Bengals here. 1-10 straight up in weeks 1 and 2 in the Zach Taylor era, and 0-5 in the last 5, despite being favored in all of these. So while everyone is trying to figure out the reason for these slow starts to the season, Jamar Chase sounds like he's losing patience.
Yeah, I feel like we always start like that. You know what I'm saying? Especially the first game of the year. I feel like we should do better by now.
How do you fix that?
Turnover battle today, especially.
But even being flat, I feel like it seems like y'all talked about it for months, only to come out that same way again, same way y'all. We've seen it for some years. Like, why do you think y'all haven't put your finger on it to fix that issue?
I don't know, man. Ask Zach, bro.
Ask Zach. Ask Zach.
Ask Zach, bro.
Reflecting to his coach.
Zach.
Jamar Chase. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
To me, what drives me crazy is when you see past performance you tend to believe things are going to change. I mean, great call on you on Minnesota, Grace, because, Sam Darnold looked very good and Daniel Jones didn't change. All those talking about players going to change. Bill Parcells used to say this: when a player shows you who he is, believe him. And when a coach shows you who he is, believe him. We can get into the whole Doug Peterson conversation later in the show, but Zach Taylor never has his team ready for opening day, and I was stupid enough to fall for it. And I knew the numbers, and I was preaching the numbers because I thought, based on the preseason, that he had changed his mode of operation. But I'm worried about Burrow. I mean, if you watch the game closely, they said he's got to shoot a bunch of shots to get his wrist loosened, that he can't really get it going. It didn't look like he had the same velocity on the football that I've seen with him before. His longest pass play was 28 yards. I had him in my top 5 last week in my Friday column. He's not going to be there next week, I can promise you. For all this talk about Burrow, we've yet to see it really manifest itself over the last 2 years. Injuries have been an issue, but they just didn't make any plays. And if you take Chase out with Higgins not on the field, then it becomes a real issue, Harrison.
Well, Michael, Oh, go ahead, Harrison.
Yeah, that's just one of the things that you just have to be concerned about when it pertains to the targets that are out there, the availability that you have with Jamar Chase. And we got to really pay attention to T. Higgins now as well. That hamstring is, you guys both know, that hamstring is not necessarily something you come back and you're fully a go with. And it's something that we saw last year with Justin Jefferson. When Justin Jefferson had his hamstring injury, that wasn't a 1 to 2 week thing. It pretty much felt like it took him out for the entire season. So if you're not having full health, and then obviously you have this risk concern with Joe Burrow, this offense for Zach Taylor is not going to be clicking as where one would expect going into the season, Grace.
Oh, yeah. Hamstrings on wide receivers, those things last months, even years. They get retweaked. But, Michael, I want to go back to one of your points about Zach Taylor not being ready for week 1. What is that? What leads to that? Is that being too soft in training camp? Does that go back to May, those practices?
Yeah. Well, I think it is being too soft. I think soft's the right word for Zach Taylor. I mean, they have this offensive mindset that you don't want to practice the player. The offensive line looked bad yesterday. I mean, Kenyon White, the second-round draft pick of the Patriots 2 years ago, looked sensational. He beat every tackle that they had on the field. They pushed the Bengals around, and I think, to me, it's a sense of a lack of real toughness to their team. When you get beat on the ground with a quarterback that look, when you go into the game, you say to yourself, we've got to do this. We've got to stop the Patriots from running the football. We've got to force them into 3rd and long, and we got to make Brissett have to beat us. They didn't do any of that. And then conversely, you got to say to yourself, look, we're going to be careful with the football. We're going to make the plays. We're going to be meticulous in how we approach this. They fumble twice and lose the game. And then, they fumble going in. I mean, they just look like they were not prepared to play. And that starts back in training camp, where you could see Andy Reid's team was well prepared to play opening day. Zach Taylor's teams, just by the evidence, is never ready to play.
Yeah, this game fell out of reach by the end of the first quarter. Bengals offense generated just 17 yards of total offense in 2 possessions. Meanwhile, the Patriots had 107 total yards and scored a touchdown on the first play of the second quarter. But I want to go to Jamar Chase for a second because, the whole team seemed to be lacking energy on Sunday. And of course, the Jamar Chase contract issue has been going on. He ended up leading the team with 6 targets, 6 receptions, but just 62 yards. After the game, it comes out that he had food poisoning. I don't know if we're supposed to believe that, but I think last week, Michael, didn't you say something like he could have claimed illness? Yeah. And is he finally taking your advice? Do you buy this? What's happening?
Well, I think this. Look, Mike Brown, the Bengals issued a statement, said, we're done talking. We're done. We're too far apart. And what made me know that this was going to be a real issue is what Jamar Chase said. When Jamar Chase said, the Justin Jefferson contract isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking well above Justin Jefferson. Well, that's not going to you're never getting that deal done because Jefferson is a good receiver as Chase is. He's a year older. And so if Chase thinks he's going to pass him by 3 or 4 million, you're not going to be able to reason with him. And Mike Brown is not a guy, the owner of the Bengals, that you're going to want to mess around. And this locker room is problematic. And I think, to me, when Zach Taylor came out early in the week and said, oh, he's going to play, don't worry, but then all of a sudden he didn't practice the next day, I don't think this is going to go away, because Chase, according to what the Bengals said yesterday, is not going to get a contract. They're done talking because they're too far apart. And I think that's going to affect the team. But what affects the team more than anything is I'm not sure Joe Burrow's wrist is really good enough, and it's going to affect you next week. They play Kansas City. Can they hold up? This line's not good up front, and his arm doesn't look to be the same. We had a beat writer on earlier in the season, and he said the same thing I'm saying today, that he was throwing the ball better, but it wasn't the same velocity.
Okay, well, this is interesting because we had our futures conversation last week, and I was thinking maybe Jamar Chase for receiving leader, Joe Burrow for passing leader. If Jamar Chase isn't motivated anymore, don't think I like that one. All right, we are just getting started here on the VSiN Morning Line. Coming up, we're going to take a look at the Patriots side of this game and more NFL Week 1 games. Don't go anywhere.
VSiN is extending our VSiN Pro Football Special. That means for $175, you'll get access to both our NFL and college football betting guides, plus so much more. With VSiN Pro, you'll receive daily picks straight to your inbox, detailed analysis on every game, and exclusive data like our betting splits to help you become a sharper bettor. Get all this for just $175 through the Super Bowl. Or try a monthly subscription and get your first 30 days for only $19. Don't miss out on this unbeatable offer. Sign up now at VSiN.com/subscribe.
Don't wait until fall to start betting the NFL. Get a jump start now with the VSiN NFL Betting Guide and get prepared for this NFL season like never before. The guide has in-depth breakdowns for all 32 teams, best bets from our VSiN experts, playoff predictions, award market previews, and more. The guide is out now, and the only way to get it is to be a VSiN Pro subscriber. Head to VSiN.com/pro to sign up and join the Sports Betting Network.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line. Okay, we already covered the Bengals side of the biggest upset in week one, possibly one of the biggest upsets we'll see this season. But now let's get into the Patriots side. And Jerod Mayo, in his head coaching debut with the Pats, it was Bill Belichick's first time since 2000 not being on the sidelines. Jerod Mayo joins an exclusive list of head coaches to win his coaching debut as a touchdown underdog. Jason Garrett was the most recent to do it in 2010. Pete Carroll and Bill Cowher also did it. So Robert Kraft gives Jerod Mayo the game ball, and those are always cool moments. So let's take a watch here.
Every one of you contributed. I'm so proud of the new players, the new coaches. People had all the excuses it couldn't happen, but you all did it, and I'm spoiled now. I'm going to count on a lot more to.
Right, yeah, we just getting started.
Most importantly, we're giving you this game ball.
So Robert Kraft gives Jerod Mayo the game ball. Then Mayo gave the exec director of player personnel, Elliott Wolf, a game ball. So, Michael, my question for you is, what does this all mean for Mayo? And also, what was Wolf's role in the building of this roster?
Well, I mean, Elliott changed the roster around. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of new faces going in there. The selection of Drake May, all the draft choices, the free agency, the re-signing of certain players that were currently on the team. And the bulk of the team was from last year that they re-signed. So, look, it's a great win. It's a great win for Mayo. I thought they played the game perfectly. They reduced the game as much as they could. They ran the football effectively. They didn't take any chances offensively. They protected better than they did at any point in the preseason. Their offensive line played at a higher level than at any point in the preseason. But and you got to enjoy this. I think Mayo should enjoy that, what he's been able to do here, because they're going to be few and far between when they come up against another team that's more prepared to play. I mean, this Cincinnati losing to New England at home in your home opener is really inexcusable. It's demoralizing, especially in the North, where you see Pittsburgh go in Atlanta with their backup quarterback, right? And they win. You know Mike Tomlin's going to be ready for every game. And then, of course, Baltimore, who lost opening day, but still look fairly good and look like they're going to compete. There was a chance to really get ahead of everybody on a game that you should win. I mean, this is what drives you crazy about the Bengals and Zach Taylor. They just don't seem, and you used the word correctly, tough enough. And I'm worried about Burrow's health. I really am. I'm worried about his wrist. I'm worried about him driving the ball down the field. Now, maybe when they get Higgins back and everything comes back to normal, but it didn't look good yesterday.
Yeah,
I would say from a fantasy, and I would say here from a fantasy football perspective on the New England Patriots as well, definitely want to key into Ramondre Stevenson. 80% of the snap share yesterday in this game. It's actually more snap share than he had in any other game last year, and he only hit that time or that mark 5 times in 2022. There was some concern that this might be somewhat of a committee because Antonio Gibson is there, but he got all of the backfield share. So if you're in fantasy football, definitely something that you want to look at as well. And I think you could always stream that defense, Grace. They were top 10 in passing yards allowed last year. And now Christian Gonzalez back in that defensive backfield as well. I think there's definitely a streaming defense, but for sure, Ramondre Stevenson, definitely at the very least an RB2 for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, Ramondre Stevenson, 25 carries, 120 yards for an average of 4.8 yards a carry and a touchdown. And a lot of his runs, too, came in obvious run situations in the second half when the Patriots were just trying to milk the clock, and the Bengals still couldn't stop him. So I don't know if that's more indicative on Stevenson or this Bengals run defense, but just not good all around for the Bengals. And Stevenson does seem like a viable option at this point. Michael, go ahead.
Well, I definitely think you hit the nail on the head. I think this just speaks a lot about Cincinnati's lack of run defense. You've got to be concerned. I mean, look, the one thing is, I think in football that we have to be really aware of, and I think we saw it yesterday, is when you have to throw the football, can you? When you have to run the football, can you? There's a lot of teams that couldn't throw the ball when people realized they had to throw it. And when you have to run it and the other team knows you're going to run it and you still run it, that's about personnel. That's about you're just not good enough. And I think that's what happened yesterday. I mean, that's the hard part. I mean, when you look at the Colts, and we'll get to the game later, but the Colts knew that Mixon was going to run the ball, especially towards the end of the game, and they couldn't stop him. That, to me, is the essence of what's going on in the league. And I think the Patriots were very clear with their intent, and yet Cincinnati had no answer. And so now they go into Kansas City, and, they're going to be a dog in Kansas City, probably over 3 because of that. But because they can't stop the run, it makes you very vulnerable. When your defense can't stop the run, everything else becomes harder for you to defend.
Always starts with the ground game. One more thing. I want to go back to Jerod Mayo for a second. His preseason odds to win Coach of the Year opened at 35-1. Those have now been bet down to 17-1. But looking at the Patriots' upcoming schedule, Seattle, New York Jets, San Francisco, Miami, Houston, Jacksonville, and then New York Jets again. I mean, that is tough. So, Michael, you said it during the break. These odds are going to be pretty long pretty soon.
Yeah. I would not jump on this too soon. I mean, it's a nice win. Do you remember when I think Indianapolis won the opening game of the year, took everybody out of Survivor, and then they didn't win a game the rest of the year? Remember that? So, I just would say let's not overreact to it. Good Patriot win, accept it. I was wrong on the game, handicapping this game, but it's going to be still a long year because I just don't think people are going to be as ill-prepared as the Bengals were, Grace.
Yeah, well, Mondays are for overreactions, so it's only right. But, I mean, yeah, all credit to the Patriots. They deserve the win in that one. Speaking of overreactions, Tyreek Hill caught in a slightly disturbing situation pre-game. Let's roll the video here, producer Elliot. So Tyreek Hill pulled over by Miami-Dade police for reckless driving, speeding, but the excessive part feels right here when he's detained and handcuffed outside the stadium with fans driving by. The Miami-Dade Police Department released a statement later saying that the officer involved has been placed on administrative leave. But Harrison, what was your reaction to this?
I was bewildered. I mean, what are we doing here? The fact that this was right outside the stadium, and I understand, and obviously you give a salute to anybody who's a police officer because they are doing our country a service. But at the same time, the lack of awareness. I understand that, there might have been situations before. If you pulled somebody over for a moving violation, you're concerned that maybe there's something in the car. They might be a criminal. You know who this guy is, and you know why he's exactly in this location. What would provoke you to actually put the man in handcuffs doesn't make any type of sense to me. Right outside the stadium. Again, this is, where he's going to work. It's just a moving violation. If that's all you're citing him for, why did it get to this point? I've gotten a speeding ticket before. Most of us gotten speeding tickets before. Didn't have to end up in handcuffs. It makes absolutely no sense to me. But I would also have to give a shout out to Tyreek Hill because he could have handled it in a very different way. Yes, he made fun of it with his touchdown celebration, and I think he made light of the situation. But even when he spoke to the media after the game, he could have been very angry about it. He could have sounded off, but he was very calm about the situation. He didn't downplay it at all, and he mentioned that he could use this as a platform to talk about any injustices that he has gone through or that he's seen in the community there in Miami. So shout out to Tyreek Hill for handling it in a professional way and trying to make light of the situation, but still being serious about it. And to the Miami-Dade Police Department, it just absolutely makes no sense to me that he would end up getting in handcuffs for speeding right outside of work when you know what this guy's job is.
On the ground, too, Harrison. I mean, they put him on the ground. I mean, it was uncalled for. It was an overreaction. I mean, it was like the Scotty Scheffler incident that happened in Louisville during the golf tournament. I mean, it's completely overreaction, which really is horrible to see because it then sends a message that this is the way it's going in every town when it may not be. I think, to me, the other thing that was proven after this is Tyreek Hill's the best receiver in football. I mean, he catches an 80-yard over route.
Yep.
Just outruns everybody. I mean, if you have him in fantasy, you're lucky to have him. Even though the Miami Dolphins didn't play well, they played well enough to win this game. I think Doug Peterson is going to look back at this tape. He gets 5 first downs in the second half. That's all they do. They never score in the second half. He goes for it on 4th down at his own 32-yard line with a ridiculous play to Travis Etienne. I mean, this is going to be trouble for Jacksonville because Jacksonville has expectations. Their owners already come out and said, we've got a really good team. I expect to go somewhere. And when you go and have a chance to win this game, where you're making Miami to get to 16 third downs, is which they did. That's critical, right? You want them in as many third downs because you're not giving up big plays when you do it. And then all of a sudden the dam breaks. To me, this was one of those games I thought Ryan Nielsen did a great job, gave Miami yards, but then he was able to keep them out of the end zone like he did when he worked for the Falcons last year, the fourth best red zone team in football. So it's a disappointing loss. I mean, when you don't score in the second half and you only get one first down in the fourth quarter, your team is going to lose no matter how big of a lead you have. And this one hurts on Peterson.
Tyreek Hill definitely solidifying himself as one of the best receivers in the game. I'll get into those stats on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. You're watching the VSiN Morning Line as we recap NFL Week 1.
In the heart of downtown Las Vegas, a sports oasis awaits. Stadium Swim, the ultimate outdoor amphitheater, built for the ultimate sports fan, with a colossal screen that brings the game closer than ever. Reserve a daybed, private cabana, or lounge in the center of it all. 6 pools to dive into as the game heats up. And the best part, there's never an off-season. Open 365 days a year. Stadium Swim, it's always spectator season.
Looking for the ultimate sports betting podcasts? VSiN has got you covered. With a wide range of podcasts covering every major sport, we're here to help you make smarter bets every season. The Baseball Betting Show with Greg Peterson gives you daily insights into finding value on each day's MLB card. And check out Long Shots, where we deep dive into the world of golf betting, providing you with expert insights to help you bet every tournament. Find all of these podcasts and more at VSiN.com/podcasts or your favorite podcast platform.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back in to the VSiN Morning Line. We've been recapping some of these shocking results from NFL Week 1, but now it's time to get the perspective from the sports book. Now joining us on the Progressive Guest Hotline, Carl Johnson, a.k.a. Jick Jack Johnson, sportsbook director of the Beau Rivage. Carl, let's start with these upsets. The Bengals and Notre Dame. How did the book make out on those two?
Yeah, well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Michael. Good to be back with you guys. So look, the books we had a good day Saturday, Grace. Like I was telling you off air, the only bad result we had for Saturday was Texas. We took a lot of Texas money and they got there easy. Sunday, this Patriots game, and I get a chance to talk to Michael about this in a minute. That was huge for us. And I mean, it just goes to show, I happen to have the Patriots rated last on my power ratings, but there's a gap there. I only have a gap of 11 from top to bottom. And, people wonder, why does this happen? Why does it seem like these underdogs are able to get there? And the truth of the matter is that there just ain't a whole lot of gap in between the best team and the worst team. This particular game here with the Patriots, I mean, it related to a couple of big plays, and that's generally what happens.
Yeah, that's what happens. Big plays and then turnovers. I mean, so many games in the National Football League are lost more than they are won. And I think this was one of those where the Cincinnati Bengals lost it. The Patriots played perfectly. They didn't really do very much, but they didn't have to. They let Cincinnati mess it up. And when Cincinnati couldn't play the run, it became a problem. I want to go to college football. I want to ask you a question. I know we're a long way away from deciding on the 12 teams that go to the conference, that go to the playoffs in the new system. But do you think, based on the teams that you've seen so far, Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois, I mean, one loss to me is like 3 losses. How do you get into the thing if you lose to a school in the MAC? Carl, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and so that's one of the look. It's going to be a whole lot harder road, in my opinion, for Notre Dame as to say the LSU USC game, for example. Okay, but yeah, I mean, they got to run it out. We are taking 12 teams this year in the college playoffs. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be tough for a team that suffers a loss like that, a lot more so than it would be for a Big Ten school or an SEC school. Don't you think, Mike?
Yeah, I do. And that's my question. Like, to me, that one loss, I mean, if you're LSU, you lose to USC, you probably should have won the game. And of course, you got your guy there, pounding the table afterwards, Brian Kelly. But to me, to me, it seems like that can't happen. And I think that's the real issue. You mentioned, too, you took a beating on Texas. Do you have Texas? How close do you have Texas in your power ranking to Georgia?
Yeah, they're right there, Michael. They're really, really close, just within a couple of points. But, look, one of the things that we do, and where we're located here. So this year, we've always taken Georgia money. We've always taken Alabama money, LSU money. But this year, we added Texas into that. I mean, it's like Texas is now all of a sudden in our backyard. They're a little bit of ways from us, but they're in the SEC now, and for us, they're getting a lot of money, and that was the only bad outcome that we had this past weekend.
Considering the pressure package that Wink Martindale has there for the Michigan secondary, Quinn Ewers definitely played unbothered basketball there. I mean, unbothered football, rather, at the Big House there on Saturday. Carl, wanted to get to the NFL. We got a game tonight, Monday Night Football. Where's the action between the Jets and the 49ers?
Yeah, so Harrison, look, we opened this game way back in May. So we opened it at 49ers 5.5, 44.5. Right now we're trading at 4 and 43.5. For us, we're getting money both ways for us. Right now, this early in the morning, I don't have a whole lot of liability in the game. That'll pick up, that'll ramp up today. I've got some big players in the house that'll be firing away. But Rodgers seems to. We're going to see tonight. How much. Actually, see if Rodgers can get through this game. Knock on wood. I'd like to see him do good. But this should be a good game. I mean, Jets defensively are there. San Francisco's there. We'll see. I think it's going to be a close football game.
Carl, I'm glad Michael asked you about your college football power ratings, because that's exactly what I was going to do. But you're in SEC country. I'm in SEC country as well in Nashville. Everyone's high on Tennessee and Ole Miss here. So I'm curious. Yeah, you've named all the SEC teams you get action on. So I'm curious, what are your biggest liabilities out of the SEC to make the playoffs or to win the conference?
Grace, we have been getting pounded this year with Ole Miss money. To win it all at 15-1. We've got a bunch of liability there. Also with Alabama at 15-1. Let's see. As far as the Heisman, Jackson Dart, he's trading at 12-1. So, Nussmeier at LSU's trading at 20-1. So, I mean, that's how they bet us here. In the past, they bet us the LSU quarterbacks, Burrows and Jaden Daniels, who I think that kid watching him yesterday, they're going to be all right at Washington also. But, we've got a lot of liability with Ole Miss. And look, that team is deep. I think they returned 20 starters this year. They're gonna vie for. They're gonna definitely be in the playoff, and then anything can happen. But I think they got a good shot to win the SEC here.
Yeah, no question. I mean, the one thing that Nick Saban said about Ole Miss was they finally have a defensive and an offensive line that hangs in there. Last week, I was shocked. South Carolina goes in and beats a really good Kentucky team handily. I mean, that game was really South Carolina from the start. LSU now travels to Columbia. What's your take on this game? What did you open, and what do you think it'll close at, Carl?
Yeah, so let's see. I was just looking at that. So right now we opened where we're going to open. We haven't opened it yet, but we're going to open at 7 and 52.5. I look last week. I mean, you know how I feel about. I didn't like the matchup last week. I don't know why these teams do that, and I know it's probably not Kelly's fault. That was probably already scheduled, but I like to play a softer game that first game. And then leading into this, look, LSU should be good with this number. Just my opinion. They try. South Carolina's struggled the last couple of years. So we'll see, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he was beaten on the desk and stuff like that, and they just they keep getting in those situations. I mean, I think they're 0-4 the last 4 years, or lost 3 out of the last 4 openers. So not in a good spot, but they should rebound this week.
Carl, we probably didn't think this was going to be as big of a game as it is, but considering Boston College season open win at Florida State, and considering where Missouri is, that's an interesting game for this weekend as well. Where are you seeing that number, and what type of action do you expect to see over the course of the weekend in that one?
Yeah, so we'll open here at about 16.5 with a total of 54. Look, I mean, there's just not you see these upsets like Boston College and all this hype with Florida State and stuff like that. I think the worst mistake that bettors make is that they tend to bet favorites, and they think there's a bigger margin between the best teams and the worst teams, and there just isn't, especially in pro football. But college are very similar. Excuse me. And that's one of the reasons why you see these upsets. I mean, just a couple of big plays makes up for, 8-9 power rating points. I mean, it's me personally, I think if bettors would tend to bet more dogs and favor betting dogs, I think they'd be better off.
Carl, I want to get some of your insight into the Big Ten as well. I don't know how much action you get on those teams, but you mentioned your power ratings. So kind of a 2-part question here. How close is the gap between the top of the Big Ten and USC? Because they shut out Utah State. And I mean, the only reason that's impressive is because it's Lincoln Riley. But so So the gap between USC and the rest of the Big Ten, and then the biggest liability to win the whole thing.
Yeah, to be honest with you, look, I don't have that power rating in front of me, but it's not going to be a huge margin. College football is a little bit different power rated than NFL. NFL, I've got an 11-point range where my best team and worst team is in that range. College football, there could be 30 and 40 points there.
Great to know. All right, Carl Johnson of the Beau Rivage, thanks so much for joining us, for giving us all these betting insights. Can't wait to talk to you again. More on the other side of the VSiN Morning Line. We are resetting at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
A new football season means a new lineup on VSiN. Start your day with sharp betting analysis